Alright guys, upon request, I have been asked to do a They Who Endure guide, so here we go. Also, if you're wondering why I have the same shirt on for a bunch of videos in a row, it's because I had to record like 6 videos in one day, because I got to do that stuff after work, and it's interesting to try to find the time to do it. So I promise I haven't just ignored my laundry. But back into what we're here for, which is They Who Endure. So if you guys are looking for a guide or a kind of walkthrough on a They Who Endure deck, which is definitely a meta deck right now, you are 100% in the right spot. My name is Justin, also known as Shit Just Works, and today we're going over They Who Endure. So thank you to anybody who mentioned that they wanted this deck to be done in the comments. There was actually a few people who had mentioned that they wanted me to do this deck, and I don't know why I haven't made a guide yet. So we got the deck list itself that we're gonna go over, and then we got 2 games as always, and oh man, even the end of the first game alone is freaking... You want to talk about a top deck? Who needs Atrocity, man? You don't even need Atrocity to play this deck. Alright guys, and before we get into this, as always, we got the deck code and the deck link to the Mobilytics deck. If you guys want to check it out, you want to use this deck yourself. This is a very typical version of They Who Endure Spiders. There are, of course, a few cards that you can switch and swap, like a lot of people do, and we're going to go over those in just a second. But if you are new to the channel, as always, do not forget to subscribe. And if you want another notification on your phone that pisses you off because you've gotten 7,000 notifications in one day, then turn on the bell so I can be notification number 7001. All right, so They Who Endure. So for anybody out there who is kind of new to the game, maybe you're in bronze, silver, just kind of getting into the swing of things, this is a very popular deck type. Also on the lower parts of the ladder. Basically, the goal is to get a big ass They Who Endure on the field, something around 15 to 25 in that range, depending on where your opponent's at, and then Atrocity it for the win. So how do we get there, you may ask, with the They Who Endure? So basically, every time something dies, this is going to get +1/+1, and it's while it's in your deck or your hand or wherever the heck it is before you play it. Then when you play it, it triggers the effect and you get all that extra good buffiness. All right, so we have a lot of 1-drops. You got 3 Hapless Aristocrat, 2 Warden's Prey, typical 1-drops for the Shadow Isles faction. You got 3 Avarosian Sentry from the Freljord faction as well, Freljord region, which is also a great draw power card, which I'll get to in a second as to why we need that. We have Elise, which also generates spider tokens, and we're also playing the Brood Awakening package, which is kind of why we're playing Elise. Got lots of spider stuff going on. A leveled Elise is never a bad thing, especially when you can suddenly have challenger units that can pull lifesteal units and other blockers off to the side so you can attack with a big They Who Endure before lifesteal or something similar goes off. So there's typically 2 ways to run this deck. One is with Callista, one is without. This one goes the Callista route. There are other versions that run, they run 3 Wraithcaller on top of 3 Mist Wraiths. You'll notice there are no Mist Wraiths in here, just the Wraithcaller. Wow, I can't even say Mist Wraiths right now. Whew, gotta slow down there. And this is kind of where the whole They Who Endure package can change between Callista, Blighted Caretaker, and Wraithcaller, and even Neverglade Collector. Although Neverglade Collector, God, I can't talk, is probably one of the better cards for this deck nowadays, even just at 2 of. It's just a super good card when you have a lot of things in your deck that are dying, right? There's just so many different ways that you can swap out these cards, right? You can have things like, hell, you can even play something like Mistcall. You can add Frenzied Skitterers in there to really go all out on the Spider package. You could go with some Freeze, some Frostbite to stall out the game a little bit more, or something like Iceveil Archer. So there's a lot of different ways to play this. I do think that as of now, the Callista version is the most popular, which is why I decided to go with this version of the deck. So I mentioned the draw with Avarosian Sentry. One of the things that you're essentially trying to do throughout most of the game with this deck is stall the game out until you can draw into They Who Endure and Atrocity. And you do that using Averrosion Sentry with Chump Blockers, Hapless Aristocrat, Warden's Prey, a lot of these other things like Blighted Caretaker. You can get the 2 saplings and kind of pick some units off on your opponent's side of the field. So all of these, generally speaking, are just going to stall the game further and further. You're not usually doing too much damage. However, that's not always the case, right? You do have Wraithcaller, which summons Mist Wraiths. What is wrong with that word? God, I hate that word. So, which have Fearsome. So you can't actually go aggressive with this deck early on. It very much depends on the matchup. So this is a very matchup dependent deck. There's specific ways that you need to play this deck depending on which matchup you're going for. And when to hold them and when to fold them with Atrocity. You need to know when to play Atrocity, because if you play it at the wrong time, you will get axed and killed, and your opponent will just make it feel really bad to even play that card in the first place. But while we mention Atrocity here, we don't even need Atrocity. What do you need Atrocity for? We have They Who Endure. It has Overwhelmed. We're fine, right? Well, you're going to see that in this first game here, because holy crap, do we get a huge They Who Endure. And one of the other things that you will find yourself in as far as a scenario with this deck is just drawing to your outs, which we're going to talk about in a second in this first game. So without further ado, let's see how it happens. All right, I lied. It's not the first game where I get the big ass They Who Endure. It's the second game. My bad. I don't know why I thought it was first. The first game is actually, you're going to see why Ladros is in here. Ladros is sometimes not played in this deck at all. That's another card that you can swap out and not play if you like. I personally like Ladros for some very specific matchups. During the late game, can kind of get a little awkward as you continue to wait for They Who Endure or Atrocity. But we'll get into that in a second. So you can see here, generally speaking, you're going to want a mulligan for your 1-drops, 2-drops. I mean, it's not rocket science for the beginning of this deck. You want your Averrosion Sentries. You want Vile Feast if you're going against, maybe some sort of burn aggro matchup. You're going to want the Warden's Prey. I always forget that 1-drop. It's like, I don't know. It's a good card. Don't get me wrong. I just don't play it a lot. So you're going to want all of these small little creatures, small followers, so that you can go ahead and do something like, level up this Callista that we have on the field. So one of the best combos that you could possibly get with Callista, which not only makes her good nowadays, but also makes this other card good as well, is Blighted Caretaker. And Blighted Caretaker with a Callista on the field is essentially an instant level up of the Callista. So getting what is it? It's going to be 6 mana total you need. 3 mana to play the Callista, and then 3 mana to play the Blighted Caretaker. So as long as you can get your opponent, down under a specific amount of mana where they can't play any removal spells and things of that nature, but you still have 6 mana left to play both of them, a level Callista will go far for you. Trust me when I tell you that. It's generally speaking, in the beginning, it's going to draw you or get you stuff like Averrosion Sentries and Warden's Prey, which is not bad because it's getting you either draw towards your goal of Atrocity and They Who Endure, or it's getting you, either way, it's getting you additional followers that die for They Who Endure. But if it gets Warden's Prey, it's getting you Warden's Prey, which dies, and then Warden's Prey has a last breath effect, gets you another last breath person, and it's just so much synergy. It's freaking insane, okay? We're all about synergy here. So, as you can see, our opponent venges the Callista, which feels really bad, I'm not going to lie. Leveling up Elise is another thing that you're going to want to do quite often. Like I was mentioning earlier, you can pull lifesteal units, which in this case, we do have lifesteal units on the board. And here's something I want to discuss, though. You can notice we played a They Who Endure pretty early. It's only a 7/7. Now, granted, a 6-cost 7/7 with Overwhelm is still pretty good stats. Pretty good cost effectiveness, I guess I should say. It's obviously not the biggest that you're ever going to get it. You generally want to be playing They Who Endure when it's at least like 12 or 13, so that way you can guarantee an Atrocity victory. And you can actually see I played the second one as well. There's 3 in the deck, so I played 2 out of 3, both lower than I would like. And here's why. My opponent is playing a pretty aggressive deck. It's actually I've seen these floating around a lot lately. It's just Undying, Resurrect stuff, right? It's got the 3/3 Chronicler of Ruin, Undying. It's got Remembrances and stuff to get the Radiant Guardians out, which, god damn, they're annoying. It also main decks Radiant Guardians, and honestly, that's the only reason he stays alive in this game for as long as he does, because of the lifesteal. But anyways, I need to play both of these They Who Endures because my opponent has a pretty decent field. He has a lot of beefy units like 3/3s and all those Radiant Guardians or anything really that gets summoned with Remembrance. This is going to net him a 5/5. So I need stuff that's going to be able to challenge those units. Now, I'm not too worried about the Undying. Obviously, everybody knows Undying can't block. It's one of the big disadvantages of it. So not a huge deal. And generally speaking, you'll be able to chump block Undyings pretty easy with this deck. With Hapless Aristocrats, Spiderlings, damn near everything in your deck will chump block it, so you don't really have to worry about it. But again, I do have to worry about these Radiant Guardians, mainly because I need to get them the hell off the field as well, because if they continue to lifesteal for my opponent, I'm not going to be able to actually get an Atrocity off on these They Who Endure. So I do need to get these out ASAP, and there will be actually a fair amount of matchups that you're going to want to get They Who Endure out as early as possible. I believe the second matchup, or it might not be, but mirror matches a lot of the time. You also want to try to get a They Who Endure out before your opponent, because it's going to start to do more damage than usual before your opponent can. Now, obviously, if they're playing Vengeance, like we're actually playing 2 copies of Vengeance, the deck's removal can vary greatly. I mean, I've seen people play 3 Grasp. I've seen people play 3 Withering. So you really don't know what you're going to get when you're going up against a They Who Endure deck, unless you're playing competitively, of course, which you can see their deck. So you got to kind of play around a lot of different things there. But if they do have removal, it's going to suck early on. Obviously, with my opponent playing Shadow Isles, I am also worried about a Vengeance or something similar. I am able to get the 7/7 to stick, and one of the things I mentioned earlier is Ladros. This guy, man, freaking Ladros. All right, I remember they actually had to nerf him originally, or they changed the way his effect works. But this is another great example of why I like Ladros in the late game. So my opponent's playing a deck that, generally speaking, is going to have a lot of 5/5s. Ladros is a great blocker. It's going to trade with anything, and then it just goes back to my hand, and it also does more damage. Now, the way I'm blocking here, I'm also playing around my opponent having Atrocity. I don't know what my opponent's playing. I have no freaking clue. But honestly, when you're playing against Shadow Isles, you just have to assume your opponent might be playing Atrocity. So I'm making sure that I don't go below, I think at the time it was 6 health. Or no, I think it was 5 health because you got the 5 with the Undying. So there's just certain things that you want to make sure that you're playing around at all times. Atrocity is one of them, especially in the mirror match where it can get to be a heck of a mind game playing around Atrocity versus your opponent's They Who Endure, or trying to figure out when to play your own Atrocity and They Who Endure. So, all right. We got the next game against the one and only. Actually, the last video that we did was a Sejuani Misfortune Tempo deck. Link below in the description. So this is a very popular deck right now. Definitely a hard to beat deck as well. I would say that the advantage typically would probably go to the Misfortune Sejuani deck. Honestly, I'm not super, I don't play a lot of They Who Endure, so I can't get really in depth with that, but knowing what I know about both archetypes, the Misfortune and Sejuani is generally going to have the advantage. They're going to have more card advantage because of exactly what you're seeing here with the Black Market Merchant and the Pilfered Goods. And even if we do get a They Who Endure down, there's a good shot that by the time that happens, they'll have a leveled Sejuani on the field and they'll be able to frostbite it. And having, whenever you're going up against another Failure deck that's not a They Who Endure deck, if it's Ash Sejuani or the Ash Noxus deck that we've seen a lot of, I know there's like Sejuani and Swain. There's a whole bunch of shit like that rolling around right now. Any frostbite effects are just so detrimental. You really have to be playing around them at all times. I think I saw a game with Ian Noguera for Duels of Runeterra that he actually played around a Harsh Winds beautifully and ended up winning the game. When his opponent, if at any time, had more than 6 mana when he played Atrocity, could have Harsh Winds his They Who Endure, and it would have done zip, zilch, nada. All right, so you gotta worry about that at all times. Now, Neverglade Collector. It's a thing. Neverglade Collector is almost in here as kind of like a secondary win condition, as well as something that will stall out the game further if you need to, right? You're usually going to have a lot of that. Withering Wail felt so bad, by the way. I was not expecting that, obviously. It's one thing that sucks about playing against Pilfered Goods is you have no idea, what to play around. And honestly, the whole time that he played Pilfered Goods, every time he plays a card, all I'm thinking to myself is, okay, good, he didn't get a They Who Endure or an Atrocity, which is huge because they can just rip your combo from your deck and then you're just screwed. So that's another thing about playing against this deck. So generally speaking, with this Tempo Sejuani deck, they're going to have exactly what they're doing, which is, they're having greater field presence, greater field advantage over myself. It's going to be hard for me to come back from it. I do have plenty of units to play. But the second my opponent's able to get down something like a Sejuani, it's going to be very hard for me to actually come back from that because Sejuani is just such a sticky unit. She's got 6 health, and there's not going to be a whole lot I can do to kill it apart from me drawing a Vengeance, assuming that my opponent didn't already jack one with Pilfered Goods, which I think in this game they actually did. We'll find out in a second here. I think they Vengeance the Callista. I'm not sure. So, but again, you can see us using the Blighted Caretaker here to go ahead and basically get the free level up on Callista. And I think this is where we see the Vengeance come down. And God, yeah, that feels so bad. It's not even 7, it's 6. He gets to keep the 3 spell mana, man. God, it sucks so bad having your own cards used against you. Oh, man. So now we're like, all right, what the heck do we do? So we still have to try to survive, really, as long as humanly possible to draw into an Atrocity and a They Who Endure. Mainly a They Who Endure because it's going to just threaten the field in general. It's going to force my opponent to have some sort of Frostbite. Generally speaking, this deck, the only Frostbite it runs natively is the Sejuani. So the only way he's going to get Frostbite off is by leveling the Sejuani or by playing it like you just did, putting Vulnerable on a unit. But by leveling her and then doing damage in a turn to Frostbite the whole field. So it's limited Frostbite options in comparison to, your typical Ash Noxus deck, right? The problem is I don't know how many warning shots this guy might be playing, so that's something that I got to worry about as well. So there's just a lot of ways that my opponent can still basically just screw the game for me, and I'm not going to be able to get a They Who Endure off. But nonetheless, that's really my only win condition. I do have this Neverglade Collector. And that's what I mentioned before, where it's kind of like an alternate win condition. I do want to go ahead, try to keep it on the board, try to protect it, which is why I'm not attacking with it. I'm not attacking with the Callista because I want to try to get some of my units to die so I can finally get a leveled up Callista. A leveled up Callista will be good right now because late in the game, I know we mentioned getting like Avarosian Sentry or Warden's Prey early in the game. Late in the game leveled up, she is generally going to get a Wraithcaller. Actually, I think she's, unless it's Ladros, she's always going to be getting a Wraithcaller, which means you're going to be summoning more Mist Wraiths, which is one of the reasons why you don't need to run the full package of Mist Wraiths in this deck. You can see, I'm actually, just real quick, I'm open glimpsing here. And what I mean by open glimpsing is that my opponent still has 5 mana, so there's a lot of things that he could have done to prevent that glimpse. I'm doing that because I already played a glimpse prior to that he could have negated by playing something like Make It Rain, and he didn't. Oddly enough, he still had the Make It Rain, so that just tells me that he wanted to guarantee the Plunder effect to proc the Sejuani. So either way, me being able to play Glimpse there was still the right read, because regardless, he wasn't going to play it. Because that would be a lower percentage chance that he has to have the Make It Rain actually hit the Nexus and level up Sejuani. So anyways, I am able to level up the Callista here, but again, like I mentioned previously, he is going to have a way to Frostbite my units now with this Misfortune on the field. So I was worried about Warning Shot. Honestly, Misfortune is way worse. He also has the Dream and Riptide Rex. So this game, honestly, this game's over. I'm not going to lie, guys. This game's over. But there's a reason. Oh, there's a reason why I put on the thumbnail, who needs Atrocity? Because you do not need Atrocity to win the game with this deck. Now, granted, this isn't going to happen a lot of times, but it does. I actually don't even know. I don't know if you guys are keeping track this whole time of like how many units are dying, but I did not realize this many units died by the time my Dehu Endure came out. So I'm going to show you, crucially too, a mistake that my opponent makes here in a second. So I'm really at this point just waiting for a top deck, hoping that it's going to come soon. At this point, the only way I win is by, and he warning shotted there. I don't know if I agree with that play. He didn't need to, right? Because he already kills my whole field anyways. Like, there was no reason to frostbite. He should have saved that, because if he did save that, he would avoid what's about to happen, which is a big ass Dehu Endure. 29-29 to be exact. There's the Jinx emote. There's the Shen emote. And damn, I bet he wishes he kept that warning shot. All right, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed that Dehu Endure run through real quick. That second game. I was equally surprised when I won that. I had no. I mean, I knew I could hop deck a Dehu Endure. I mean, that's a perfect example of playing to your outs. That's exactly why, especially in tournaments, you don't just concede all the time. I mean, you do if there's absolutely no outs for you to draw. But if you have one card that you can draw that will win you the game, and in that case, that was Dehu Endure, assuming my opponent didn't have Frostbite. There was still a situation where I could win, and I did it. And when that is the case, you do not forfeit. Never, 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 never. So I hope you guys enjoyed that video. As always, everybody stay healthy, stay positive. I hope shit just works for you, and peace out.